should see it as a kind of introduction for tomorrow's lecture. So the analysis I'm going to describe now is an example of a complicated analysis that we are doing in LHCb, and it will give you a feeling of how things are put together and how, in order to manage to obtain a very good precision, all the detector has to work properly. So maybe some of you have studied or are aware of the first time of CP violation in BDK, which was obtained by bFactory, the detector which were called Babar and Bell. I'm saying which were because now they are all stopped. And they performed the first measurement of sine to beta, and Sergei was showing you something how sine to beta is related to, is one of the angles of the unitarity triangle. So what I'm going to describe this morning is the measurement of phi s, and phi s is the equivalent of 2 beta, but for the B sub s measurement. So this, you remember yesterday, I told you that if there is one thing to remember, is that in order to get CP violation, you need two paths to reach the same final state. So this is my final state, and here I will have two paths, one direct path with a weak phase which is in the decay, and then the B0S, because it's a neutral B-meson, can undergo mixing, so there is a phase due to the mixing, and then it can decay, and because it's the anti-particle, it will have a minus sign here, okay? So at the end, I have a difference phase between the two paths, which is phi mix minus twice phi decay, and this is the angle I'm going to try to measure, which is a sign of CP violation in the BS system. Of course, as yesterday, you can stop me and ask questions. Okay. So this was really in a pictorial way. Now we can draw the Feynman graph, which are giving these two effects, the mixing and the decay. So for the mixing, as we already said several times, both Sergei and myself, these are box diagrams here. Okay? And while, so this is a, okay, so I'm sorry, it's hardly visible, but here you have a B0S, and here you have a B0S bar, there is a bar. Okay, and for the decay, I can draw two diagrams, this one and this one. Okay, so from all these diagrams, I will have weak phase differences and thus measurement of potential CP violation if it exists. This is mainly what I want to say on this diagram. Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. So look at this one. This one is much more probable than this one. Okay, there you have much. It's a higher order diagram. It means that at first order one can forget about this one. But still, even if I forget this diagram, I can still have CP violation. At that point, if it was not 9 in the morning, you could say, but come on, you're removing one diagram, so you have only one path. No, I still have two paths. One due to the mixing, and one which is just the decay. So mixing, decay, and decay. So still, even if I don't have this diagram, I have CP violation. What I've drawn is a standard diagram, and they can be computed in the standard model. And in fact, if you the CKM matrix element, you can see that this angle phi s is linked to the phase of this element, which is, according to standard model prediction, extremely small. Okay? So it's cleanly predicted to be extremely small. So this is a place where you want to search, because if you measure an effect, it will be discovery of physics beyond standard model. Of course, you remember what we said yesterday. It's not only to measure an effect. You have to be sure that the effect is not due to your detector. Sergei showed you that there are many measurements, and I will come back tomorrow on that, which can be used to constrain the CKM matrix element. And from all the other measurements, I can predict phi s or 2 beta s the same. Okay? And this is the prediction from all other measurements. So you see 0.04. So tiny and precise. Now I have to measure it directly. And this is the experimental challenge. So this is a summary of our roadmap. So I have a tree-dominated diagram. It means very low theoretical uncertainty, so precise prediction in the standard model. However, we will see that, I should have written it on the slide, sorry. Maybe you've seen it from the diagram. The decay mode, which we are going to use, is this one. Okay? So this is a pseudoscalar, but this is a vector particle, and this is a vector particle. Because these are two vector particles, it means that we will have a mixture of CP odd and CP even. And if we do not disentangle this mixture, if I have half-half, I will measure 0, even if CP violation is not 0. Well, the effective CP violation is 0. So it means it's going to be a complicated analysis. Okay. On the other side, the branching ratio is relatively high, and this particle decays in many things, but in 6% of the case, it decays into a pair of muons. And yesterday, maybe you remember that I told you that muons are easy to recognize. So it's going to be a clean signature and a relatively easy channel to select. What is going to be complicated is to disentangle the CP odd and CP even state.
Sorry, can I ask you,
yes.
What is a CP odd and CP even states?
So you can have two. So you can have a CP plus 1 and CP minus 1. So one is CP odd, one is CP even. Then, according, because this is a 0, and this is 1, this is 1, according to they will be in this 1 minus 1 and combination, then you will have. So all this, I will show you the formula later. Okay, still you will see that because it's a BS, and because we have these two mass eigenstate, we need to measure delta gamma s, so the lifetime difference between the two BS states. And we also need to know, for CP violation, if it is a BS or a BS bar, which was produced. You remember? When I draw that, okay, I say Ts is this. But if I would start from a BS, it will be all the minus sign, so I need to know. And then if I do not separate, more or less I will not see anything, okay? So I need to know if it was a BS or a BS bar. And this is quite complicated. And I will explain. So, these are all my observables. The tagging decision, which answered the question, is it a BS or a BS bar which was produced? What is the BS proper time? At which time does it decay? And the decay angles because of that. Then, what is the physics behind that? We can write it as a p-wave amplitude of the k plus k minus system. The k plus k minus, do you see if I write here? Or is it hidden by the screen? You see? No. No. So, I'll rewrite everything there. So I need to know in which state is this. Is it 1, 1, 1, 0, 1, minus 1? In which fraction of it? So this is the p-wave amplitude. Then I need to know if there is something below my kk. It's maybe not a j equal 1 state. It can be a j equals 0, so kind of S wave. And then there's all other terms of the interference. I will show you the LB formula just after. And then, of course, delta gamma S, the BS lifetime, and phi S, which is the thing I'm interested in fact. But in order to have it, I need to measure many other things. So it's a really complicated as an orchestrating where everything should work together in order to obtain the phi S measurement. I need to reconstruct the mass of the BS to select it, okay? I need to measure its proper decay time. I need to know if it is a BS or a BS bar which was produced, and I need to measure this decay angle. Okay, so let's go one after the other. How we do that? So how do I measure if it is a BS or a BS bar which was produced? And this is the tagging. So this is a sketch of what is going on. I have a proton. It collides to another proton. This is the LHC. It collides at the primary vertex. You remember we drew one yesterday. Then the BS fly and decays into a jet psi and a phi. This is my signal. There is the other B quark. Okay? I have a B and a B bar. So one of the B is used to make the BS, but the other will do another B hadron, which will decay into something, I don't know what exactly, but quite often there will be lepton, which charge will tell me from which B quark does it come from. So I'm now changing side. Why do I know that? Because so here I have that, okay? So this is my B hadron, not the BS, the other one. So then, this is mass of the C quark is about 1.5 GeV, roughly, while the B is 5 GeV. So its PT, the PT of this is going to be larger than the PT of this one. So I will select high PT lepton. But in some cases, I will do a mistake. You will see in how many next slide. So this is the idea. We're also playing the same trick with kaon. It's in the slide. So, yes, I'm doing mistake. From time to time, I'm picking up the wrong lepton. Because in some cases, here, it will be pion. And the only lepton I will have is this one. And maybe I will pick it up as I will make a mistake. And this is called, this mistake is the wrong time, wrong sign fraction. So this is a mistake too. So here this is wrong, I did a typo, okay? The mistake fraction is the number of wrong tag to the total number of tag. Okay? This is, so don't copy that. So it tells me in how many cases I make a mistake. Then I have also the tagging efficiency, which is in how many cases I'm able to find a lepton, let's say. And this is the efficiency. And at the end, what really enters in the equation is this formula, which tells you that if you throw a coin instead of searching for a lepton, and you say random, so omega will be 1/2, okay? So this will be 0, and you will have lost all your sensitivity. So it's very important to be as correct as possible for this tagging. And this is a terrible factor. If this is 10% epsilon f, it means that it is as if you have reconstructed 1000 BS into JEPSI5. If this is 10%, it just means as if you have 100 perfectly tagged, where you can say it was created as a BS or created as a BS bar. So it's a very important factor, and it is really something which is crucial to extract the information of your data. Okay, so these are some. So what I've explained is this opposite side tagging lepton. There are many other, and I'm not going to explain it, but it's basically the same idea: is to find something which remembers what produced, if it was a B or a B bar quark which was produced. All this measurement of epsilon tag and the mistake fraction omega has to be calibrated on data. You cannot trust Monte Carlo for that. Once again, it's always the same story. You do not trust Monte Carlo. So anybody? Maybe not. Okay. I'm not going to be mean on the morning. So in order to calibrate it on data, what you can use, for example, is to use this type of decay, B plus to JEPSI K plus. Okay? So this is similar, not identical, but similar to my BS to JEPSI5. Okay? Then I'm doing this tagging. I'm looking for a lepton, high PT, and I say, okay, I look at my tagging, I say, it's a B bar quark. But here I know what it was, because it's a B plus. And a B plus, I have a charge on the kaon, which tells me that it's a B plus, so I know it's a B plus. A B plus, it's a B bar U, and the charge B mesons do not oscillate. So it is a B plus when it decays, it is a B plus when it was created, so I know the truth. So this is a way to check on data if the tagging is wrong or right. And this is the way we measure omega on data. Really. which is so important to measure, because if you have 10% effective tagging efficiency, it's just as if you have only 10% of your data to use for the analysis. And what we have on LHCb is only 3%. So if we reconstruct 1,000 BS to GEPSI file, we only have 30 to work with. So it's a terrible dumping factor. We are trying to improve this as much as possible, but this is very, very complicated in real life. Nevertheless, just to show you that even with this low thing, we can really identify the BS bar initial state. And this is a distribution as a function of the decay time of the BS, the number of candidates, and we can say, according to our tagging, does it mix or not? What is mixing? So, production. You see what I write on the production decay? If I produce a B0S and it decays as a B0S, it is no mixing. If I produce a B0S bar and it decays as a B0S bar, no mixing. Okay, this is unmixed case. These are the blue point. Okay? And if it's mixed, so the red one, then it decays at the B0S bar. And here as a B0S. This is the mixing case. Can I do that with the GEPSI file?
No.
Ah. Yes. No. Well, yes, no. So, I cannot know if it is a BS or a BS bar at the decay. So what people use for that is they use something like so here you know. Yes? Does it make sense?
Yeah.
I realized it was not clear to do that on my slide. Sorry. Okay, so first step. We know how to recognize if we have produced a BS or a BS bar. Produced. Then we have to measure its decay time. So this is much easier. So what we do, we have the primary vertex where the two protons collide. We have the BS vertex, which decays to GEPSI 5. With the velo detector, we measure L. We can compute the momentum so that we can compute the proper time. So this is much easier. Nevertheless, we need to check it on data and to measure the resolution. And this is a way to check it. I'm not going to explain it. But with this, we can see that the resolution, the time resolution, is about 45 frames per second, much larger than the oscillation period, which is about 350 frames per second, so about 8 times larger. So that's why, because we have this good resolution, we are able to see this, and this is delta MS we have been talking about yesterday. Alors, now I told you, so that was the easy part of the time. 1, 1, 1, 0, 1 minus 1 state. And this is cos theta k. So we put everything in the BS center of mass, and we look in the direction of the BS, the KK pair in the KK plane. And this is theta k. We do the same for the mu mu, and this is theta mu. And then we look at the angle between the mu mu plane and the KK plane. Okay. Physics tells you that it should have different distribution according to the state 1, 1, 1, 0, and so on and so forth. So then the CP content. There is something tricky there. It's because the HCB geometry is such. You remember this spectrometer? It changes a lot. Sorry. It changes a lot the acceptance function, and in particular for some this theta k, and theta mu for the phi. So everything has to be done on simulation, and later on check on data. So now we are ready because we have computed the tagging. Is it a BS or a BS bar? The decay time, the triangle. We are able to write how is the PDF signal should be. It's an awfully complicated function, which depends on the decay time and on the triangles. So this is the decay time part. It's not very complicated. You recognize cos delta ms. You recognize so all this standard as a CP violation in the mixing. Some hyperbolic cosine with the delta gamma s and sine delta gamma s. And then you see CK, DK, AK, BK, and here you have everything encoded about phi s, the CP violation, and the amplitude, the SOM. So it's getting terrible. So these are all. So everything has to be put together in order to fit the signal. The slide will be available. I'm not expecting you to read everything. But even if it's complicated, it can still be worked out and written. If you would analyze all this formula and see all the various parameters and write all the PDF like that, you would see that you have a two-fold ambiguity. It means that, so I have these parameters, and if I change phi s to pi minus phi s is the thing I'm really interested in, I remember it. And at the same time, gamma s, delta gamma s minus delta gamma s, pi parallel into pi minus delta parallel, and you see, if I take this or if I take that, I obtain exactly the same solution. So this is called a two-fold ambiguity. This is due to the fact that you have cosine and sine everywhere. There's no magic in it. At that point, we rest, and we go on, we are near to the end. The selection, on the other side, is very, very easy. A Jeb side and a phi, it's really an easy analysis. You look for two muon, okay? You construct their invariant mass. You select around the Jeb side. The phi decays into two kern. You look for two kern. I told you the kern are not as often produced as the pion. So it's clean, it's easy. So you select around the phi, more or less. So this is the two muon invariant mass. You see, a huge peak and a very small background. This is a two kern invariant mass. A huge peak and a very small background. Selecting, then computing the Jeb psi and phi invariant mass, and I obtain this BS. You see this huge peak and still a small background. So for one inverse femtobarn, which is about 1/3 of the data recorded by the HCB, we have about 27,000 events. So a large number. Yes, so it's easy and clean to select the event. On this 27, so we are happy to have 27,000 events. Can somebody tell me why we are so happy? What is going to happen to them? Are we going to use like that, the 27,000? Is it the statistical power we're going to have?
Probably no.
Huh?
Probably no, it's going to be less because some of the events aren't going to be usable.
Yes, exactly. And they are not going to be usable because of tagging. You remember? I told you the tagging. I told you that we have 3% tagging efficiency. It means that at the end, on the 27K, we have to multiply it by 3%. And I can't do that on top of my head in this morning, so, but it's a small number at the end. I never do calculation like that, I can. But still, it's a huge statistic we're starting from, and still, we still have 3%, so it's equivalent of 9,000. So I don't know, I'm going to try. 900, somebody. 900 perfectly tagged. So, okay, so it's still a huge, much larger statistic than anybody else in the world. But you see, from 27K at the end, the statistical power is the one of 900 events. So then we have to play all the terrible analysis with the angles. And this is, so I told you, decay time, cos theta mu, cos theta k, and phi. And these are the distribution of the data. So the points are the data. The line are the components. So in blue, it's the overall terrible complicated function, which is there. Okay, this is the blue. But then I can, and then it's able to extract the various CP odd, CP even components. So in red, this is the CP even. In green, the CP odd. And this is the small S wave, and I'll come back to that after. So, how am I able to obtain the CP? How am I able to recognize CP even and CP odd? Not from the time, really, but from the angle. You see, this is CP even in red and CP odd in green. How different they are from the angle? Here they're very different, here also. And this is with this angle that I'm able to extract this information. That's why I need to do this terrible full angular analysis. If I would not do it, I would not be able to disentangle between CP odd and CP even, and I will not be able to measure sin phi s properly. I need to do the angular analysis to be able to distinguish. Yes.
What is
Alors, the S wave is it's going to be so this is the KK invariant mass. It's mainly a phi, but below the phi you can have something small which would not be of spin 1 but of spin 0. It sounds ridiculously small, and maybe some people are doing a lot of small details to have a very nice analysis. I'm not telling you all the details. Why am I explaining it specially? And you will see once needed. But this is a spin 0. Okay. And at the end, I told you we have the full fit, so we can measure phi s and delta gamma s. So here is the result. Phi s, delta gamma s. This is the result. Oh, sorry, this is the result. In red, 68%, 90%, and this is the standard model. You remember the standard model prediction? 0.036 plus or minus something very small. So we are measuring it very precisely. But a few slides ago, I told you there is a twofold ambiguity with a pi minus phi s and minus delta gamma s. But I haven't shown it. What am I doing with that? Did I put it under the carpet and forget about it? And no. We're able to say, and this will not be at all standard model. It will be completely the reverse. It will be a clear sign of new physics. Because it will be, you see, if phi s is, so we are measuring here phi s close to 0.1, let's say. 0.1 rad, okay, 0.1 radian, I have no, okay. So it would mean about 2 radian, no, 3 radian, to be completely off the standard model. If this is the truth, this is new physics, a big discovery. But I'm not telling you that we have made a big discovery, new physics beyond the standard model. So what happened? And this is US wave. Okay, so this is some view. It can be some kind of student exercise from a nasty professor at some point. Maybe one day you will look at the slide and say, oh, I will use that. So if the k is k plus k minus pair is coming from the phi, it's a p wave and it's a Breit-Wiener. And the phase of a Breit-Wiener amplitude, when you write a Breit-Wiener, you can prove yourself that it varies like the red thing, like that, and it varies, it changes rapidly around the resonance mass, so which is 1020 in that case, okay? If you have an S wave, there are several models, but at a very good approximation, the phase is going to be flat. Okay? So, if I now do the phase difference between the S wave and the Breit-Wiener, I obtain the blueprint. Here I have no data, just some hand-waved model. Okay, so if I do the phase difference, it decreases rapidly around the resonance mass. So, if I repeat my fit here, separating the data from in this beam, well, below the peak, above the peak, and so on, and compute the phase difference, I will see a behavior which will tell me something about the sign frequency. So now, I repeat the fit, the terrible fit I've shown you, in beams of nkk. Okay? So this is the nkk, and here is the around the phi mass. And each time, I have two solutions. Okay? This one and this one. And I obtain two sets of points, one for delta gamma S positive and one for delta gamma S negative for the two solutions. But I know which one has a physical meaning according to if I have an S wave and a P wave. I know from very simple argument that it has to go down. Yes? The blue thing. And this is the solution. There is one solution which goes down, which is the physical one. And unfortunately, this is the one which corresponds to delta gamma S positive. So that's why we just plot that. Okay? For the fit, there is another one which is at delta gamma S negative and the pi minus 0.1, but it is killed by the analysis in beams of nkk. So this is the comparison of LHCb experts. So this is the result. Numerical one. So this is the comparison of LHCb in green and previous experiment, D0 and CDF at the Tevatron and Atlas at the LHC. And you see that everybody agrees. You see that LHCb is more precise, and you see that we agree with the standard model. And you see that you survived, more or less, to one of the most complicated analyses of LHCb. So you can be proud of yourself. Good. So now we are going to change subject. So FCNC, flavor changing neutral currents. I will talk a little more about that tomorrow from a more phenomenological point of view. Today we will see it more experimentally, and I hope it will be it will help the youngest. So this is very famous, FCNC. Maybe you know that. Yes, you do. Okay? But if you look carefully, this is on the slide. If you look carefully, this is really FCNC. Huh? This is so there is a CKM matrix. There is but FCNC and T2W. There is end of the paradox. So FCNC, as we will see, has been used. So I will come to that tomorrow. Has been used quite heavily to search for physics beyond the standard model in a way, or something you don't know because it's sensitive to new particles in the loops or in the boxes. And it's a place where you're able to do prediction quite cleanly. So there are FCNC, so flavor changing neutral current, are very small in the standard model. They are only higher order and even suppressed because of the gene mechanism. We will see that tomorrow. So basically, when you say FCNC, something should switch on in your head. It means very rare decay or rare decays. But so in that box diagram, schematic 1, you can draw it with standard model, but you can have other particles here, and then it can change some effect, some Ricci ratio, some angular distributions.
May I ask a question?
Yes, you can.
What is GIM?
So Glashow-Idiopoulos Mayani, and I will you're coming tomorrow morning?
Yes.
So you will do more tomorrow morning, sorry. But it's okay, it's a kind of symmetry thing, so not tomorrow, otherwise I will be really... So well, the idea is that they introduce, it was in the 70s, and there were people seeing that, for example, you have some decay of the k plus 2 pi 0 in nu, while you do not have the same for the k0. And people were wondering whether it was normal or not. And then these three guys, Glashow-Idiopoulos and Mayani, say, okay, if I introduce, so at that time only the U, the D, and the S quark were known. And they said, if I introduce a C quark, I have some kind of symmetry which completely suppressed this decay, which was very, very rare. In fact, they do more than that. If the symmetry is exact, if all the quarks have the same mass, it's completely forbidden. They show that it can, if the C quark has a mass different from the U quark, then it's not forbidden. And they, even with that, predict the C quark mass. This is a gene mechanism. Okay, so I told you that we are trying to identify decays which are very cleanly predicted by the standard model. But the standard model very cleanly predicts things in the weak sector, electroweak sector. But so that is, you can compute it very cleanly. But you very well know that life is more complicated. You have QCD, and QCD at low energy, you have all these interactions and so on and so forth. And it's much more complicated to predict. There are some theoretical uncertainty. So all the tricks is because at low energy, QCD is not perturbative theory. You have to find ideas, ways which are work in common between experimentalists and theorists to define observables which are as clean as possible from a theoretical point of view, and also as experimentally accessible as possible, because sometimes theorists just find very nice observables which are very complicated to do experimentally, not to say impossible. On the other side, experimentalists can find very easy mode, very easy to reconstruct, but theoretically they cannot cleanly predict it, so it's really a work together. So I told you that QCD is complicated, and so people are trying to find ways to put aside the parts which are very difficult to compute. And so theoretically they developed some kind of approach, and at that point I'm telling you how I understand the thing, and the theorists may disagree, and some of your professors can also explain you in a more theoretically clean way the thing. But this is at least me, as an experimentalist, how I use it, and I think it's still more or less correct. So the idea is to separate the low energy part and to put it, for example, in form factors, decay constant, and then the high energy effect, which is perturbative QCD, weak interaction, eventually new physics we are all looking for. You can compute it and you put it apart. So you create this kind of product, and you can potentially add new physics for a given place, and this is what people are trying to fit in a way. So let's go back to the one of the most famous modes for that is the BS or BD to mu mu. So at that point, this is awfully simple. 2 muons. It's even much simpler than the previous one where I had 2 muons and 2 k. No, I just take 2 muons of opposite charge, I compute the invariant mass. Very easy. Well, experimentally easy. Theoretically, it can be cleanly predicted. I'm not going to enter into details, but this is the branching ratio computation. So this is okay, G Fermi, so you recognize him, you know the BS lifetime because it's a branching ratio, the BS mass to the 3, the CKM matrix elements, so kinematic terms. Here you have something where I've put everything which is perturbative QCD, non-perturbative QCD. So, okay, it can be predicted that precisely, but it's a part. And then this, what we call Wilson coefficient, so a way to describe which diagram are entering in the scale. And here, I have a lot of them. Some are due to standard model, but some can be there for new physics. So, in the standard model, these are the diagrams which are entering. Then, any person creating a new physics model can draw a new diagram. He can replace a W by a charge X, and here he can replace the Z0 by some neutral X, and so on and so forth. Okay? So this is at least what I have from standard model, and this is an example of new physics. And in this example of new physics, the coefficient there will be proportional to some new physics parameter. So this is a SUSY supersymmetric model, and these are the supersymmetric parameters. Okay, so it's just a game to play. You can predict it. So first, let's look at the prediction of the standard model. So I told you in the standard model, these are the diagrams. But in fact, from very simple arguments, you can already see that this mode is going to be standard model, just because you have a spin 0 particle, the B, which decays into 2 leptons. Okay? So here it's in the rest frame of the B, and because of J conservation, you have to have a left-handed particle and a left-handed ortile particle, or this, and it's forbidden. Okay? Yes? So, it's forbidden only if the lepton mass is 0. Is the lepton mass 0?
No.
No. Okay? But it's small. The electron mass is really small. I mean, half an MeV. The muon mass is not that small. It's already 140 MeV. So, in the standard model, this branching ratio is 3 10 to the minus 9. It's extremely small. For the electron, it's even 10 to the minus 5 smaller than the muon. That tiny. For the tau leptons, it's much larger. 200 times larger. Okay? So, what am I going to... so what would you do to search for this mode? Would you use E plus E minus? Would you use mu plus mu minus? Tau plus tau minus? What would you do?
Tau plus, tau minus.
Okay, because it's larger.
Yeah.
Yes. But do you see tau lepton in your detector?
It's different.
No, it decays. Into what, for example? Huh? Muons? Only muons? And? Yeah, but... Ah, yes, neutrino. It will give a lepton, so the tau gives, let's say, E minus, anti-neutrino electron, tau neutrino. So tons of neutrinos. So do you see neutrino in your detector? No. So you're losing, in a way, energy conservation. You're not able to reconstruct the invariant mass. So the tau, it's, for the branching ratio, the best place to look for it. But experimentally, it's over because you cannot reconstruct the BS mass. You see? Well, still people are trying to do it. I know some person doing it, but it's a crazy analysis. So, what would you do? Huh? Muons. Okay. Yes, muons are easy. I'll show you already results with muons. Yes, if you want to see it, you're looking for muons. But imagine that theorists are wrong. It can happen. So then, this is not, so let's say 3.23 plus or minus 0.27. In the 0.27, there is all that you don't know about non-perturbative QCD. Okay? Imagine they made a mistake, they are wrong. So they cannot predict it like with this error, but it's 10 times larger. They are completely wrong. So then it's 3 plus or minus 3. This is not a good prediction, it's 3 plus or minus 3. So imagine you see something in your detector, you select some event in mu mu. What are you going to conclude? Does it agree with standard model? If standard model says 3 plus or minus 3, or how do you know? So then what you would do is to look for electron. Because electron, it's not 10 to the minus 9, it's 10 to the minus 14. So even if they are wrong by an order of magnitude, or even 2 orders of magnitude, it's going to be so tiny, their prediction, with a huge error, but so tiny, that if you see something, this is new physics. Okay. So this is what you would do. But in LHCb, doing electrons is very complicated, because you have a lot of tracks and so on and so forth. So at the end of the day, people are preferring to do muon. All that I spent 5 minutes to explain, but still I think they are important concepts, okay? It's a trade-off between between what you can do and what you want to do. Yes?
Could you clarify what the uncertainty for electrons will be? Will it also be 0.27, but 10 to...
Yeah, it will be the same relative error. Because of all the uncertainty is not due to the electron mass, but due to that. This non-perturbative QCD, which has nothing to do with the electron type.
But then the logic that you use for muons that
Sorry?
the logic that you use for muons that the uncertainty could be much larger,
No.
the 3 plus minus 3 was...
So it will be, so for, let's say, the branching ratio is for muon, then for electron, okay, let's forget about the 2 here, but let's extend to the minus 5 smaller, so that it will be relatively it's the same side. So now, let's go on. No, last point. I talk everything about BS, but in fact, I just can replace my S quark by a D quark. I change the CKM matrix element, and because of the CKM matrix element, they are different in size. For the BD, the branching ratio are about 30 times even smaller. So it's also interesting to look for the BD, because if you find something, maybe it's new physics. So let's go. Okay. So it's very clean. People like clean probe of new physics. So they have been looking for that mode for the BD or the BS for a long time. You see, in fact, it's even started in 1984 by the FIO experiment in the US. And you see time, and you see the branching ratio upper limit. So people started at 10 to the minus 5, so 4 orders of magnitude larger than the prediction, and then it goes down. This is the standard model prediction, roughly. And then we'll see. Okay. So looking for something like of the order of 3, so here it's an old number, sorry, but of the order of 3 point something 10 to the minus 3 is really like searching for a needle in a haystack. I mean, it's very difficult. You will see a very small number of events, and you have to be very careful to select them as precisely as possible. So how are you going to select those very rare events? So this is a sketch of your signal. So here again, you have the primary vertex, so the 2 protons collide. They give many tracks. One is one of the particles created is a BS or a BD, which decays into 2 muons. So I told you it's a simple analysis, but simple analysis you do not have many experimental handles to select them. You're looking for 2 muons of opposite charge with coming from a displaced vertex, and a displaced vertex means impact parameter. You remember yesterday the drawing on the blackboard? So when you're coming from a displaced vertex, you have some impact parameter. So this will help you. So you want to, you do this analysis in stage. First, you select event with large impact parameter, then displaced vertex, and you select good muon. And then you start from that. Because it's very complicated, you need to use multivariate analysis, such as a boosted decision tree. Some of you may have heard about that. This is a tool which is getting more and more used in high energy physics. So it's a way to combine discriminating information in a non-linear way, basically. Because it's not because I have 2 muons of opposite charge that I have my signal. Because I remind you that I have 2 B quark producer, B and the B bar. You remember the drawing from the tagging. So one of the muon, the mu minus can come from the B hadron, and the mu plus from the other B. So both of are good muon with impact parameter. So the only thing, they are not really coming from the same point, and all this has to be used. But I remind you also that this is a very rare decay. So you have to be very efficient on the decay you're looking for. So you want to kill efficiently the background and to have a good signal selection. So people are creating variables and they are training it on Monte Carlo to see if it's working. So these are examples of variable, and the blue is the signal Monte Carlo, and in red is the background Monte Carlo. So you see that between blue and red, you have a lot of differences. So it will help you to recognize your signal. At that point, somebody should complain and say, haha, but this is not serious. You told us not to never believe trust Monte Carlo. What are they doing? They are trusting Monte Carlo. So, a little bit yes, but they are checking it. They cannot check signal Monte Carlo because they don't have signal. They are looking for it. But for the background Monte Carlo, they have a lot of background. So they can check it, and you see the black points. These are background data that you take from the B sideband. So you always, I already drew yesterday this sidebanding. So when you reconstruct an invariant mass here, so you reconstruct the new invariant mass. I don't know if you're going to see something in there, I don't know. But here, these are the sidebands. So these are background samples, signal free, there is no signal. So here, this is background, you're sure about it, at least you're sure about something. So you can check the background Monte Carlo, and you see there is a good agreement between sideband data, so background from data, and background Monte Carlo. So this is a way to check your Monte Carlo. Okay. So at the end, this boosted decision tree answer gives you something which is very different from background and signal. So it's a way, it has put all this information all together and combine them into a unique variable, which I call BDT there. When you're looking for something so rare as a 10 to the minus 9, you should worry about background, which are rare, but not that rare. And such backgrounds can be, for example, semi-leptonic of decays of D to pi mu. Okay? So it doesn't look like signal, but still, you have already a good muon. Then, what can happen to the pion? Decay in flight, yeah. So, then it will give 2 good muon. Okay. But you have a neutrino that you don't see. So, it will give you a mass, something below the big peak. But still, it's not very far away. The neutrino can be very low momentum, so it can be very close of your signal. So this is kind of dangerous background you should study. Even they are rare, they are 10 to the minus 4, then they have to have decay in flight, but still. When you're looking for something 10 to the minus 9, you have to be very careful. And then you can compute how many events you expect to see from your Monte Carlo that you don't really trust, but at least it gives you an order of magnitude. And assuming you have standard model only, it tells you that you have about 11 single events from BS and about this from BT. And then, from the number of serves, you need to compute a branching ratio. How do you compute a branching ratio? You have a number of events that you will fit. For example, you will take, so you construct your B, the new invariant mass. It looks like that. You're doing a simple fit with a, I don't know, you say my background looks like a straight line. My signal has to be like a Gaussian. I'm doing the fit and I will compute how many events I have there. This is my know how many you have produced. Well, this is the observed, sorry. Then you have to contract by the efficiency. And how many you have produced, it depends on current integrated luminosity, how many, the BB-bar production cross-section, the hadronization fraction, in how many cases a B quark hadronized as a BS. But this is very badly known. They have huge systematic uncertainty. So in fact, people are doing another trick, very normalized to a very known branching ratio, but I'm not going to describe because it's easy and not very. Okay, so I told you, this is a variable to recognize signal from background. So if I look at the RBET region here, you see it's a log scale. Huh? I have very few background and still a quite good signal efficiency. It's flat. So if I'm cutting at 0.7 in VTT, I have still 30% signal efficiency. And this is what people are seeing with the full LHCb statistics. So I know it looks ridiculous when you haven't done the analysis. I haven't done it, but so you see these two poor peaks. Okay, this is where you expect to see the BS. This is where you expect to see the BG. You see that first your background is low. Okay, this you there. There's not a large number of events. You see some excess in the signal region. You see that. And this is the rare background from the decay flight of the pion. Remember we were discussing 5 minutes ago. And from that, people can try to fit the number of signal events and compute the branching ratio. And in fact, even if it looks small, it's still significant, about 4 sigma. So the probability that it is a background fluctuation is very low, in fact. 4 sigma, I have no idea, but it's very low. I don't know by heart how it is. But the probability that the background fluctuates statistically to give this peak is very low. And not only LHCb is doing it, but also CMS here. And they are also about 4 sigma, a little bit more. So both experiments doing it very different, in a very different way, are seeing independently a number of events which is significantly different from the background fluctuation. I told you that according to standard model, you should see much less VD, sorry. But still, you're not biased, you try to see if you measure something. And in fact, it's not significant, and I will come back to that one. So this is the measurement of the branching ratio, which is in agreement with the standard model expectation, unfortunately. This was really an important hope for people looking for new physics to find something there, and they have not. We have not. For the BD, I told you that it's not significant, and I think that I will skip everything which is related to the limit setting, otherwise I'm going to be really late. So, trust me, so it's in the slide if you want to look, but that's the... So, observation of the BS, upper limit of the BD. With that, you can put quite stringent constraints on new physics. I told you the standard model predicts something very small, but if you have new physics, you would have had a much larger branching ratio. So because you have not observed this much larger branching ratio, you say, I'm killing new physics model. And for example, this is a constraint MSSM. So we don't have really to worry. This is a kind of SUSY model, supersymmetric model. And these are the parameters of the SUSY model. So it's the gauge-inner mass and all spin-half particle mass, assuming there is only one in this model, so they all have the same mass. And okay, so it's a busy plot, but you should focus on the them, it's larger than 900 GV. Okay? But this indirect search, just measuring the BS to mu branching ratio, which is the BS is a 5.3 GV particle decaying into 2 muons, but still sensitive to much heavier particle in the loop. And because we do not see any enhancement of the branching ratio due to this heavier particle, we can say this heavier particle should, if they exist, they will have a mass larger than 1.2 keV. Much more powerful than the direct searches measurement. So, of course, this is so in this model there is another parameter which is tangent beta, which related to the X sector in the Suzy model, and it varies with the value of the tangent beta. So, for each tangent beta, you do one of these color plot, and you see that when tangent beta is 50x, what I've told you, when it gets smaller, then it's not as efficient. You see? So you should also be careful. Don't be. Sometimes people are just showing this one to say how it's powerful, but in real life, well, not in real life, but one has to always to be careful about other parameters playing this game. And you see that when tangent beta is 30, then direct searches are more powerful. So it's a complementary interplay. So this one I will try to be fast. So B2 K*** mu, this is the very last example I want to give you detail like that, just to give you a feeling of what can happen. So I'm not going to be long because, at the beginning, because you see, K* mu, the K* decays into K pi. At that point, it should remind you quite strongly BS to J psi phi. Okay? Phi decays to KK, and J psi to mu. So in fact, it's a four-body decay. So you have three angles as before. You remember the terrible fluid with three angles? So it's the same formalism. But no time measurement, no tagging needed, because you know what you are working with. When you have a B0, it gives you a K* 0 mu plus mu minus, which gives you K plus pi minus. So looking at the chart of the K1, you know if you have a B0. If you have a K minus, you have a B0 bar. So it's similar to J psi phi, but slightly easier. You don't need the time, you don't need the tagging, but you still need the terrible angular formalism. It's a kind of diagram which can be expressed in the same formalism as BS to mu. And as I told you, it has a complicated shape in the angular form, but because you have no time, you can still write it in a single slide. You remember the other, it was easier. This one is easier. In this S3, S4, S5, blah, 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 FL parameters, you are encoding all the physics and which diagram plays a role or not. And all this depends on the dilepton invariant mass, because yes, it's easier, you have only three angles, no time, but what you want to do is to study it as a function of Q squared, which is the dilepton invariant mass squared, because the relative population of these three diagrams in the standard model or other diagram in beyond standard model, new physics, will vary with Q squared. So this is a sketch of Q squared, what we will use. So this is Q squared here, and this is just to show you the various beams we are going to use. And here, there are two gray bands. You because here you are on the jet side. So here it's jet side K star. And this is not at all the same physics. It's with a jet side, this is very different physics. And people, it's a huge branching ratio, but you do not have the same diagram, so you don't want to get it basically. And here is a kind of excited jet side. So in practice, you select the event, you count them in the various Q-square beam. So this is all the signals. So I reconstruct a K star and 2 muon, I compute the invariant mass, I plot it. Okay? In each Q-square beam. So you see this is the data with one inverse femtobarn. Okay? And from that I can compute the branching ratio in each Q-square beam. As for the BS2 mu, but much more developed. And these are the results. So, what do you see? So here you have nothing, jet side, side to S. You're not looking at it. It would be huge if you could do that. Much larger branching ratio. Then you see that the data and the theory agree, but you see that the theory has a large error. Okay? This is the error of the theory. These are the data points. So it's not precisely predicted because of a non-perturbative QCD. So then you should experimentally find other observables, such as the one linked to the angular distribution, because in that case they will be cleaner, or at least you can find some which are cleaner. Okay, but you remember we had 28,000 signal events. Now we have only 900. So then experimentalists has to find some tricks. You cannot perform this so complicated angular fit with 900 events. So I'm not going to describe the tricks, but they are written here. And if somebody wants, I think the slide will be available, so you can look at them. But then you can look at some, so you can find trick to remove part of the distribution, and then you only have S6, S9, S3, for example, and FL to measure. And this is one of the most famous ones because it's quite cleanly predicted. What is cleanly predicted in particular is where it crosses the zero line here. So from theory, it's reasonably cleanly predicted. Here, Q0 is where it crosses the zero line. So this value where this curve crosses zero. And this is a measurement. So you see that it's in agreement. The precision is not yet huge, but it's getting there. Okay. Why do we care about all that? We do care about all that because there are models beyond the standard model which predict in some of this angular distribution quite, this is the standard model as a function of Q squared, the green band, and these are new physics scenarios. And you see that first they predict something significantly different from the standard model, and according to the new physics scenario, it can be either there or there. So you can even distinguish between new physics scenarios. So that's why we are trying to measure it. And this is what we measure. So you see, this is around 0.5, something like that. So it's about, it's on the same scale. So you can compare. And you see that basically we are not measuring something which is huge, but the uncertainty are still too large, so people should work more, get more data to better constrain it. And I think I will not open this parenthesis. And this is how it's well, this is just for you, but I think I will skip this one. So in fact, you can play this trick of the angular distribution more and more, and you can find other variables. And I just want to show you, because it was something, this is a very, from last summer, it's a quite fresh result, where people get excited about that, because in one of the districts, everything goes well with the standard model, except here, when there is some kind of discrepancy. You see prediction of the standard model is supposed to be good in that field. Okay? So the data points are a little bit far away. And at that point, you're facing what everybody faces in particle physics. Is it a statistical fluctuation, or is it new first sign of new physics? Who knows? Nobody. Me neither. We don't know. We just have to wait. We need to have more data. Okay? You cannot know. But okay, at the same time, theories are getting excited and they say, okay, maybe it's a Z prime showing its first sign there. So they are building a model with a new heavy boson, like a Z0, Z prime, and they say, give this type of effect. That's great. Other theories are saying, come on, your QCD uncertainty are underestimating. This is not true at all, it's much larger. And if it's larger like that, it's just 1 sigma, okay? So nobody cares about 1 sigma. So people are putting a lot. So this is, I want to be optimistic. This is an example of good physics. So people are doing fit with these variables, and they say, so they are adding a Wilson coefficient, one from new physics, the C9 NP new physics. If there is no new physics, the data should be centered here. And you see that the data at 1 sigma is here, at 2 sigma is there, so it's a little bit far. So. Okay, so at that point, you cannot know. Wait and see. This is really, so they are more complete. So wait and see. So this is the end of this 3-hour thing about the LHC, LHCb. So I hope you will come back home with few things in it, which is working in the hadronic environment of the LHC is tough. Experimentally, it's complicated. You have many tracks, you have a lot of experimental complication, but still having a good detector allows you to perform B physics in a rather precise way. Behind all the slides, there was something I haven't explicitly said, but I have heavily used, is that it's very difficult to perform absolute measurement in LHCb or in hadronic environment. So people are using tricks of ratio, branching ratios, and things like that. There is also something else. Because of this environment, you never trust your Monte Carlo, you check it on data. This is the only thing you should come back home with. With that, we have obtained very precise results in the BS sector, which was, for most of it, unexplored yet, but also in the B0 and B0D and charge B sector, which was quite well explored by B factories at Japan and in California, but still now LHCb is more precise, and people are now starting to study much more complicated modes with neutrals, low PT electrons, which are much more complicated than LHC.